This is Brian Clark. I'm the lead artist at Visionscape, and today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be giving you a comprehensive tutorial on how to prepare a SketchUp model for use with the Virtual Property Architect client through the SketchUp importer. We're then going to actually import the model into the client, and I'm going to show you that process from beginning to end, where we import the model, set up the initial information, and then actually go in and replace some of the textures with our own Visionscape materials. So what you see here is I have a house here that I've downloaded off of the SketchUp warehouse, and my hope is that this isn't too dissimilar from projects that you might have. I'm actually, as a beta user, I'm assuming that you have a working knowledge of SketchUp, and that maybe you have some projects like this, you know, somewhere on your hard drive that you would like to try bringing into the client yourself. So I'm going to show you the process of preparing the model in SketchUp, and that process is going to consist of 3 stages. The first stage being non-destructive edits, where we're actually just going to be concentrating on fixing things in the areas of the geometry that we know we want to import. After that, we're going to work on materials, and I'm going to show you some quick tips for very quickly configuring your materials so you can control them easily once they're in the client. And then finally, I'm going to show you some of my quick routines for destructive edits, where we're actually going to be taking some pieces away from the model that we don't need to actually be in the client for us. So let's get started. So for the first step, for non-destructive edits, basically what I'm doing here is I'm just all I'm trying to do is identify the parts of the model that I know I want to be in the scene when I import it. So I know for a fact that we're going to be removing the interior of the house that you see through the window. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to inspect the exterior of the model, all the parts that are going to be imported, for holes and for back-facing polygons. And with back-facing polygons, I'm just going to say a few things. Back-facing polygons cause some problems in the client, in the Virtual Property Architect client, because the client is a traditional real-time 3D environment, where the front face actually matters for things like you know, shaders and for collision detection. In SketchUp, the front and back face are used pretty interchangeably, and you can sort of see, I've poked a hole into the back here, and you can see how you can actually get in there, and the back faces are all exposed. So if you have parts of the model that do not have that default texture, it's very hard to spot when you are looking at a back face. So all you're going to have to do is go to View, Face Style, and you're going to change your face style to monochrome. This is going to switch everything to the default SketchUp texture, and you're going to be able to see when a face is blue, like this one, that the face is reversed, and you need to reverse it again in order to expose the front face, like so. Also keep in mind that after you switch a face, you might have to go ahead and fix the material. So I'm going to do that very quickly right here. This stage kind of bleeds over with the texturing and material stage a little bit. You can kind of do them at the same time, but I like to do an initial inspection very quickly for back faces and also for holes like this one that I'm going to take the opportunity now to fix very quickly with the pencil tool. And we're going to get rid of that. So now we can be sure that we don't have any back-facing polygons on the exterior of the model. Everything looks good, and we are ready to proceed with materials. Next up, we're going to spend a little bit of time organizing the materials on the model, and Our intention here is to make it a little bit easier to configure the model when it's been imported into the Virtual Property Architect client, but we're also going to make it a little bit easier for ourselves to do things like remove the exterior as well. What I like to do with models like this is I like to use materials as a means of identifying and grouping parts of the geometry I want to use, and then later on I can just go and turn those parts of the geometry off, and I can very easily remove the parts I don't need. So why this stage is very, very important is because, again, one of those things about SketchUp where it prioritizes ease of use over model cleanliness, I would say, is that it's very easy to get in a situation where you think you have materials that are uniform. You think there's one roof texture on the entire model, but if I was to select a face, right-click and say, let's select all with the same material, we can see now that this part of the roof actually has a slightly different roof material. So we're going to go ahead and check that out. So this part of the roof, we just sampled it. We can see it has a 3 foot by 3 foot texture. This part of the roof has 4 by 4. So there's your difference. But there can be other differences like rotation. Sometimes SketchUp will just arbitrarily break up a material group even though there's no real difference between some faces. So it's very important to just go in, and when you've identified something like that, just go take a part of the material that you know you want, replace it, and then once you go back to your arrow tool, right click, select all with same material. You can see that now we have one roof texture. We don't have 2 or 3. So we're only going to have one roof texture that we have to configure when we import it into the client. We're going to do the same thing for the other textures on the house, all with same material. This is looking pretty good. This little accent part of the peak, we only have one material for. We're going to check out the brick in the wall. Looking pretty good. Now the parts where things get a little bit hairy, at least I find this with the SketchUp library, and if you're very diligent about applying your own textures, this might not be a problem for you. But take a look at some of these white parts of the model up here. It's very difficult sometimes to tell whether or not you're using just one material for this white trim, or if you're using multiple materials. Let's get this. Same material. So right away we can see there are some things, if we go in and we get our paint bucket and we inspect, we see that these window frames are using the default texture, whereas some of these peaks are actually using a white material. What I like to do in a situation like this, and this is going to look a little bit odd, but if you bear with me, what I like to do is start anything where I absolutely know that I'm going to replace this material when I bring it into the client. I'm going to go ahead and first let's select all parts with this material. I'm going to go ahead and give these kind of a weird color. In this case I'm going to make this a nice neon green so that I can just, this makes it very, very easy for me to see what parts of the model are sharing this material. So instead of having to select all with same material, find something else, replace it, select all with the same material, I can just select all once, I can give it this color, and I can go ahead with my paint bucket and start replacing. Oh, that was a little odd. I'm going to have to fix that. I can start replacing the parts of the model that I know I want to be in this material group. And I would just advise, don't forget about little details like, underneath your roof underneath the peaks. So we can see now that I've isolated the material that's going to go on the roof trim and the underside of the porch. And actually, I'm probably going to make this a different material down the line, but for now you can see what I'm trying to do with groups. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off the recording. I'm going to finish grouping the materials like this, and then I'm going to lead you into the next stage, which is destructive edits. Okay, and we're back. And as you can see, my house got a lot more colorful. What I've done here is I've used actually color materials, some of these materials in the palette, to start identifying my unique material groups. I've got one group for the windows and doors, I've got one group for the porch, and I've got one group for the trim. And actually, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and take this and I'm gonna do one last quick edit here. I've got one group for the undersides of the roof and the porch. So I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the image aspect ratio. And what I mean by that, is whether or not the texture that you've applied in SketchUp is square. If you look at some of these, and I'm going to actually go and inspect some of these textures, you can see some of these brick materials are in the material panel, not filling up the entire square of the thumbnail. And what that means, this roof material is filling it up a little bit closer. But what that means is that a material like this brick, it's going to actually stretch the Visionscape materials that you apply to your model in one direction a little bit. So you want to make an effort to find square textures. And a nice thing about these color materials is that when you import them into the client, you are actually going to get square textures out of them. So we're going to go ahead and let's find a brick texture that is a little bit more uniform. Alright, so this one doesn't look great, but it'll do. And we're going to do the same thing for this this texture down here on the foundation wall. You can see this is definitely not square. This is going to stretch your Visionscape materials out a ton. So let's find a stone material that is a little bit more uniform. Did that wrong. All the same material. That's why I always select that. So we've got material groups set up. We've got square materials, as far as we can tell, in all places. And we are now ready for the final step, which is our destructive edits. Now that we're ready to make destructive edits, we want to think about the types of geometry that we don't want to import into the Virtual Property Architect client. And the way I generally approach this is I have two sort of categories of geometry that I look for to remove. The first category is things that are too complex. Either they're too high poly, or they have too many materials, or a combination of both. And normally this is high poly components, like these trees you see here, or sometimes people just put very, very detailed, complicated parts of the model in. The other category is just things that functionally you don't need in your project when you're working in the Visionscape client. So in this case, that's going to be the interior of the building. You can see there's this entire modeled interior. We're going to remove all of that. But that might also consist of, you might also have a ground plane in your scene that you might want to delete. You might have a backdrop. You might have, you know, a pool, which you can't actually, you know, if you have a pool within your scene that's recessed into the ground, you don't have a way of creating that recess in the client, so you're going to want to get rid of that. So now that we know our two categories, we know we want to get rid of complex objects, and we want to get rid of geometry that functionally we don't want, we can get started into our destructive edits. For this scene, for complex objects, all we have are these two trees that I've placed in here for the purpose of this demo. What I usually do here is I go to Components. If you go to your Components in Model, you can right-click, select Instances, and just delete. Very quick, very easy. And then next, we want to get rid of the interior. We want to get rid of things that functionally we don't need. So this is where effective grouping comes in and begins to help you tremendously. Now that I've grouped all of my materials, I know I have only one roof material, so I'll right-click, select all with same material, right-click again, select the bounding edges, and then I'm going to go to the Edit menu, Hide, and I'm going to repeat this process for every material group that I want to import. Now we'll get the underside here, all the same material. Oh, almost forgot my bounding edges. Now the reason that I hide the bounding edges is because it makes it a lot easier to go and do a quick marquee select delete operation after all this. But we'll get into that when we get to that part. Alright, so we finished hiding all of our geometry, hiding our bounding edges. I'm going to just go ahead and find any other geometry that I'm just, you know, if I think for whatever reason one of these extra little lines that are poking out might be a part of something I don't want to delete, then I'll just hide them. So these are all of the parts that we want to get rid of, and because we set ourselves up rather nicely, just go and select everything, hit delete, go to edit, unhide all, and we can see now there's no interior to the house. If I wanted to be very thorough, I could probably get in here and continue to remove the floor. But for the purposes of what we're doing, you know, this is perfect. So we now have a fully prepped model for import into the Virtual Property Architect client. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and for the next part, we're going to be within the client and we're going to start to import and configure the model. Now that we're in the second half of this tutorial, I'm going to begin to show you how to use the SketchUp importer that we've packed into the new beta release of the Virtual Property Architect client. I'm going to close the splash screen right here, and I'm going to draw your attention to the main toolbar that I have open, and you'll see that there's a new button in the ribbon for SketchUp. If you hold this button down, you get a menu that allows you to add a new SketchUp model to the scene and to the catalog, or to select something that you've already imported once before. I'm going to be showing you how to import this house, so I'm going to choose Add. Now, in this folder, I already have my house loaded up and ready. This is the house that we just worked on in the first half of the tutorial. So I'm going to select this, open it. We see the house, and we get this SketchUp import dialog box. This dialog box allows you to set two things. It allows you to set the object type, and as a result of that sets the category within the catalog. And it also lets you define some names, a primary, secondary, and tertiary name, which is also how we organize our products in the catalog. So a word about this object type menu. Some of these object types actually have functionality that they bestow upon a SketchUp model. If you have a house already in your scene, the window, door, and house decoration object types become selectable. And these let you actually mount your SketchUp models to houses in the scene that are Visionscape houses, or even other SketchUp models. So you can make an awning in SketchUp, bring it in, make it a house decoration, and actually mount it on a house. For our purposes right now, we're actually bringing in the house itself, so we're going to make this a structure. I'm going to call this Demo House. And I'm going to leave the secondary and tertiary names blank, because when you leave these blank, it actually fills this in with information that I find useful. It tells you the date that you imported it for secondary name. It tells you the file size for tertiary name, so you know how much space you're increasing the file size of your scene. And if you leave the primary name, it's even going to take the name of the SketchUp file, so it would name this house4.skp. So I'm going to name this demo house, and we're going to add it to the scene. Now we see the house that we just worked on, that we've just prepped in SketchUp. It has all of our odd color selections, but that's okay because we're going to replace all of these with Visionscape textures. So, now that we've brought the SketchUp model in the scene, after you click on it once, double-click again, and you'll get this cursor. You can see my cursor has turned into an arrow with a box with one side highlighted. What this is the material selection cursor, and this is what allows you to apply Visionscape materials to parts of your new model. As you click on different parts of your model, you can see every face that shares that material lights up, and this tells you what part of the model you are affecting at any given time. We're going to go ahead and we're going to replace this roof material first. If you look over at your properties panel, you'll see now that we have a material selected. We have this selected surface details box open. This tells you the surface ID. It allows you to toggle visibility for your surface, like so. And it allows you to select a material type from our catalog. These are all of our generic material libraries that we've provided to you. Many of them have bump maps and reflection maps and things like that. For the roof, we're going to look in our roofing menu. And let's just give this the standard asphalt. So that's looking okay. We're going to replace the trim with a white wood material. If you zoom in, and I'm going to switch the direction of the light so that you can see, the bumps are present. And they do respond to lighting. So, one good thing about grouping your materials accordingly, we have this material here, this orange material, that's also going to get a white wood. The problem is, in its default configuration, the wood is spanning the up and down direction. We want this to span horizontally so that it wraps around the house. So if we zoom in here, what I'm changing right now is I'm changing the angle. specify I want it to be 90 degrees. Now we can see the grain of the wood is flowing in the direction it needs to go. For glass, I'm going to just point out that we have a glass material library. Most of these are transparent glasses, so effectively, if you bring a SketchUp model in, you can do interiors of your house as well as exteriors, although we don't really support that so much. But it is an option that we want to give you. For now, though, if you just want to deal with the exterior of your house, you can use opaque glass. And this gives it our default Visionscape glass material. Now for the bricks, we're going to give this a new brick material. I believe this was a red brick originally, so we're going to give it this faded red brick. And we can see that because we selected a square texture, this brick is coming in at the appropriate aspect ratio. And we're just going to go ahead and scale this up, which is another material command that you're provided alongside angle. Maybe that's a little bit too big. That'll do. Let's give this a stone wall material. This Fremont material looks rather nice. You can see the bump maps. Oops, sorry about that. But you can see the bump maps on the bottom of the house are now working very, very well. We're going to get the last few materials here. Let's get a roof. I think we have some shingles that match what this was. Very close. There you have it. Oh, one more before I forget. The porch. Since this is a patio, let's just go with decking boards. So we should have a wood board material. I think we should have a white board in here somewhere. Here we go. It's a little bit odd, but this is just a start. So as you can see now, we have this house that we've taken from a SketchUp, from the SketchUp warehouse. We've retextured it in Visionscape using our own materials in order to get these bump maps. And that is how you use the SketchUp importer to bring your models into the client. Now, before we end the tutorial, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about objects that can be mounted to SketchUp structures or Visionscape houses. As you know, there are certain things like doors, windows, and house decorations, which I'm going to select here, which need an object in the scene in order to interact with, and then those objects can be mounted onto said other object in the scene, like so. So you can get an awning that mounts to a house. I'm having a little bit of difficulty maneuvering this thing into place, but you do see what I mean. But we want to allow you to use the SketchUp model library as a functional model library. So for something like this, you might not necessarily want to use a Visionscape awning. So, say you have something like this fancy glass awning that I've got here. I've done a very little bit of prep work just to make sure that, you know, the material groups are okay. I've exploded this, worked with the materials, and recombined it. So let's import this as a house accessory. I'm going to give this a name. And we're going to make this a house decoration. Now notice that now that we have a SketchUp object in the scene somewhere, we're able to assign an object type of window, door, and house decoration. We're going to go with house decoration, and we're going to add it. Now we see that we have the initial SketchUp model, but there's one very, very big problem here, and that is the orientation. It looks like, for the most part, things came in okay. The materials are looking okay. But the orientation of the awning is flipped around this axis. So for situations like these, we have this Advanced tab that you have available to you whenever you have a SketchUp object selected. And this gives you some very basic offset and rotation commands, as well as some scaling commands if you really need it. So for right now, we're going to find the axis that we need to rotate this around. There we go. And then we are going to offset this in a direction, not that one. That's the one. Now you can see the awning is in the orientation that it was supposed to be. And then scale it down a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. And if you want to add another one from the library, you can hold down the SketchUp button, go to the Select option, and you can see all your import categories. I believe this was a house decoration. It was the glass awning. We're going to add it to the scene. And you can see, since we already had a house decoration selected, it grabbed the scale from the last awning. But we do still need to make our orientation fixes. You can also configure the materials, as we did before. Let's give this a blue tinted glass. You can now see that little bit of reflection. And we're going to leave the that white vinyl material alone. You can copy-paste objects like any other Visionscape object. You can also use the arrow keys to nudge objects like you did before. Be aware that because SketchUp models are not as, I guess we'll say, we have these smart objects, right, like these houses. So with SketchUp models there are a few limitations. With a smart house you wouldn't be able to do this, to tab this model off of its mounted face. But with a SketchUp model there are a few little kinks, so just be aware that Visionscape houses are a little bit easier to work with mounting objects. And if you're going to be mounting any objects like this to another SketchUp, say SketchUp structure like this, you want to take that first step where we looked and we fixed back-facing polygons. You want to take that dead seriously, because if you have a face, like say this face here was actually the back face, if we attached this this awning to it, it would actually be facing into the house, and that's not what you want. And the absolute last thing that we're going to cover here is we're going to cover a case where back-facing polygons and overcomplicated models have made working with a SketchUp imported model difficult. And I want to show you some quick tools that we have that if you ever find yourself in this situation, you'll be able to use these tools to, at least in some simpler cases, get around the issues. So here we have this glass house. You may have seen this in a fly-through from the overview video. So you'll know from the fly-through and the overview video, there's actually an interior to this house. So there's a lot of stuff going on this particular model. But the problem that we have here is because there's so much complexity to this model, and because it was modeled somewhat sloppily, if we try to select this roof, notice how when I try to select the roof, the trim of the house comes along with it. And that's kind of a problem, because say if we wanted to apply roofing like this, see how it applied it to one of the materials in that group we had selected, but not all? What you're seeing here is you're seeing an error that was caused by bad back-facing polygons. Specifically, you had a material that was used and that was sharing a back face and a front face, and it causes an issue like this. To work around this, you can actually get to this material that's been sort of grouped up into this erroneous material ID, and you can do that using this surface ID menu. You may have noticed it switching numbers back and forth as we select different materials on the scene, and we can see almost everything here is a back face. So this is a pretty wild model. So if we wanted to get to this roof material, and we absolutely had to work with this in this state, we have no time to go back in and clean it up, maybe we'd already configured half the materials. If you select this menu once, and then you use the up and down arrows to tab through, you can actually select different surface IDs, and you can see here I tabbed to 163 and I ended up landing on this main patio material. You can keep tabbing through, or you can hold the button down and you can watch as it sort of flashes through all of these various surface ID assignments. You see here there's a very quick flash going on near this door. That's because we ran through the door material ID. We hold the button down a little bit farther. I think I saw something. There it is. 261, and that is the actual ID of this roof. So like I said, this is a coping mechanism for a worst case scenario. This is going to be very difficult to work with, because if you ever want to go back and edit this material for the roof, you're going to have to go and you're going to have to find surface ID 261. So that's the worst case scenario with back-facing polygons, and just a quick tool that we've provided to let you get around it. So this concludes our comprehensive tutorial on how to prepare a SketchUp model and then import it into the Virtual Property Architect client using our new importer. We hope that this tutorial has provided you with a deeper understanding of how the importer works, so that you'll be able to use it to its maximum potential. We await your feedback, and we're greatly looking forward to seeing what you are able to create with this new tool.